Good evening, everyone. Swarthmore Borough Council's work session of June 3rd, 2019 is called to order. I see all members of the council are present, as well as our mayor, speaker, borough manager, Jane Billings, and borough solicitor, Robert Scott. Betsy?
I just wanted to ask, in thoughts of what just happened in Virginia Beach, since those were municipal employees, that we just take a very brief moment of silence to honor the dead in that latest gun violation. Like 10 seconds?
Yes. Thank you, and thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
This is a work session, so we'll have two public comment periods. The first one is right now. So any member of the public who would care to address council on any issue, please come forward. Stand at the podium and state your name and address. Anyone interested in commenting?
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Isabel Painter. I had a comment. Okay, I had a comment about the parking meters in town. I saw that's on the agenda, so I guess I'll just go over an incident I had last week, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I received a ticket for a meter last Tuesday. When I walked up to the meter, it said out of order failed. And I put a quarter in and it still said out of order failed. So when I came back and I saw that I received the ticket, it was a little frustrating. I came to the station to dispute it, and I spoke with one of the officers who told me to come back up here and speak with Jane, who then told me to come back the following day to speak with the chief, and he wasn't there. So then I spoke with Officer Barbo, and then that's when I got a phone call from the chief the next day, who told me basically he wasn't going to dispute it because I should have paid through the app. Well, a couple things with that. I didn't have the app on my phone. I'm not going to give my bank information to an app that I don't use or trust. That's not something I feel comfortable with. There are other people in the town that have the same problem, not to mention that a lot of people don't have smartphones to get the app. So that was one of my concerns. Second, I was told that I was supposed to move my car. There's no signs in the borough that says that you're supposed to move your car. So how is anyone supposed to know that? It also doesn't say it online. It just says that the meter needs to be reported if it's broken, which I did. And then when you think of it, the ticket was for an expired meter, but the meter wasn't expired. I paid it. It just wasn't registered that it was expired. So I'm not paying that ticket. I tried to dispute it, and that didn't go far. I've also had multiple, I just finished working at the co-op. I've been there for 6 years, and multiple employees have told me that they have very similar problems where they pay the meter and it doesn't register, and then they come back into the store to buy all the quarters and there's another ticket on their car. Or my one boss had knee replacement surgery last year, and the same thing happened to her, where she paid the meter, it wouldn't register that she paid it, and she got a ticket, and they told her to move her car, but she had just had surgery, so she wasn't going to move her car and try to walk. Now, I understand the app is supposed to be for convenience, but that is more of an inconvenience, and as we spoke on the phone, comparing it to an Easy Pass is just not the same thing at all, because if you're going to have an app and coins, then they both need to be working, and if the meter does not accept both forms of payment, then that's not the patron's fault. So that's my comment. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I think we understand.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Alfredo Rico. I would make two requests along the same line of parking. I would ask that the borough take whatever steps are necessary to ensure that vehicles are not ticketed when they're parked at non-functioning meters. Understanding that The parking supply is a public commodity that we manage and regulate very well to the benefit of the adjacent land uses. In my opinion, having a space that is occupied but not turned over is better than having a space that people just can't park in. So I would suggest that if there are ordinances that require people to be ticketed when the meter's broken, that those be amended, and that if there is a broken meter, people are not ticketed. My second request, sort of, as many of you may realize, parking, Isabel's experience brought out a fair bit of public comment in various online forums, which are always somewhat interesting. But there does seem to be a certain impression that the vigor of our parking enforcement is a little, lack of a better term, not compassionate. I understand that enforcing the regulations for parking is critical to their functioning. I understand it's got to be enforced. But in many cases, the parking enforcement personnel are an ambassador to the community. And in the scheme of trying to make an encouraging and welcoming downtown, we don't necessarily want to create the impression that we have predatory enforcement. So for what that's worth, if that can be considered in discussing that with the enforcement staff, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to address council on parking or actually any other issue? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hi. Hi. Robert Small. What I was trying to figure out is I've landed at some of these meters a couple times in a row over weeks. Are they being fixed? That's my only question. And what's the process for that? Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, I'll call the first public comment period to a close. First item of business on our agenda is with the Environment Committee. Lauren?
Sure. First of all, we are meeting on Wednesday, June 6th, and I believe we're discussing a possible paper bag, plastic bag ban or something like that, straw ban. The EAC is going to be investigating that.
June 6th. What, Wednesday?
26th, sorry, 26th, yeah. Okay, secondly, our main agenda item today is this company called Curb My Clutter. The Environment Committee is recommending that the borough sign an agreement with this company. They're based in Saverton, and they collect electronics and textiles, clothing, towels, and things like that from people's homes. And they're in several townships and municipalities near here. What they do to be very efficient is it's primarily a smartphone app that you use. And let's say, Mary, you had an old computer from 1990 that you wanted to get rid of. You'd say on the app that you had this day, and they tell you what day they were coming to pick it up, and you put it on your porch. It's not really the curb, it's just called Curb Your Clutter for alliteration, I think. But and they would come and get it on that day. And for computers, for televisions and microwaves, you'd pay a fee, a small fee. But otherwise there's no cost to the residents, and there's no cost to the borough. There would be a contract that the borough would sign, and you've seen a copy of that. And the borough would agree to announce the service 3 times a year, and Curb My Clutter would provide the copy for that, right, and the graphics and stuff like that. And 10% of the money that is collected, which is not going to be a huge amount, is going to go toward the borough.
Except not the fees, I think, for the
Okay.
TVs.
Oh, right.
Whatever else
Just
they
where
want.
they can sell the material.
Yeah.
Right.
To the Environment Committee, it kind of seemed like a no-brainer. Are there any questions about it, or any conversation you want to have?
I have a comment on the agreement. I guess my first question is, they're local, they're from Souderton, which is
Yeah.
Bucks County, correct?
It's in Montgomery.
Montgomery. Have we talked to other municipalities who've used them? Are they happy with this, or do we know?
They're new to the market. I know that another province is using them.
Oh,
Radnor,
And, yeah, a few in
Haverford,
County
their
are,
friend.
but they're all recent.
Yeah.
use.
Doing the same pilot program.
It's a pilot program.
Yeah.
So my only comment and question, I guess, for the solicitor and for everybody else was in paragraph 2.3 under the 2.3.
Page
Other
2.
page, yeah. It's the confidentiality provision.
Yeah, it has a Sunshine Act.
Yes, and that,
Right?
yes, I see that. But also, we have to keep this confidential during the term of it and then in perpetuity afterward. And my question to you was, would it be possible to put intentionally in there about disclosure or willful breach of confidentiality? Because what if we just negligently or unwittingly breach it somehow?
I felt that the whole reference to the right to know law kind of negated the rest of the language. I mean, this is anybody who asks for a copy of this contract is going to get it. I think that the language is fairly meaningless because of that. But I mean, so you want to put the word intentionally.
Yeah, like not intentionally to disclose, because even though, well, let me ask you that. The right to know wouldn't just be the existence of this agreement or this relationship. This is about keeping the information, the transaction confidential, isn't it? The underlying part?
The platform.
The platform,
yeah.
their
Which is a defined
copyrighted,
term.
yeah, their intellectual property and all of
Yeah,
that.
sure, yeah.
So-
Oh, I see.
And they're allowed to go in and get equitable relief,
yeah.
and I'm concerned about some unwitting breach that we do. And they may say no to that, but I wanted to ask. Think about it.
Yeah, I mean, normally in these kinds of provisions in a commercial context, parties will insert language like intentionally, knowingly, or, through reckless disregard or something, so that it, as you're saying, Mary, so it's not simply somebody made an inadvertent disclosure,
Yeah.
didn't mean to, or wasn't even aware that it was happening. and so
Right.
forth.
That's what I'm trying
So
to get at.
that seems reasonable, Bob, if you,
So just the word intentionally.
In the second line, it would be not intentionally, and then down at the third line, acknowledges that it's either intentional or willful breach shall cause CMC irreparable injury. But it has to be some kind of intentionality, not just negligence.
I think it's fine.
I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, any other comments about it?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So paragraph 4.5 says exclusivity. During the term of this agreement, the borough shall not contract with any other person or entity for the collection of any recyclable materials, period.
Right, and that refers
conflict with
to,
our contract?
well, that refers to,
The recycling is our textiles and
But I don't see it limited or defined in there.
Textiles isn't defined.
Yeah.
It's not defined.
It's not.
It says that a few times.
should we add maybe textiles and electronics?
And define what they are. But I think Ross's question is still, does that conflict
I'm
with
just
the
saying
contract we
exclude
have?
our current,
well, it says,
Curbside recycling.
it says textile and e-waste, that's what recyclable materials are in the contract.
they are, that's what.
Textiles and e-waste, so I guess the question would be, under our current recycling contract, which, do we recycle textiles or
No, we
e-waste?
don't, so I guess
E-waste.
there wouldn't be a problem.
Paper isn't considered a textile?
No, it's not a textile, but it's cloth, yeah.
And they don't recycle paper.
Right.
In their textile,
Yeah.
or vice versa, yeah.
it just seemed awfully broad to me.
Is there any way to contact them other than the app, other than using the app?
Oh, yes, good question. You can absolutely telephone them, and they can schedule you in that way. It's not limited to an app.
So the 7:30. $2,000 a year.
Okay, so unless, if that's all, then I guess we'll vote on it next week. And be sure to look at the website if you haven't already. There was a link in there.
Any further discussion on the contract or any other aspect of the proposed relationship?
There are some benefits for the borough, I can tell you right off the bat. We'll have a much better account of the tonnage of waste coming out of the borough, which is helpful when we're applying for grants. We'll know how much we've diverted from the waste stream. And I wouldn't say we get calls every day, but we get a lot of calls of people trying to dispose of electronics. The county does not hold any electronics events anymore. The borough has participated with other properties in media over the past year, but we've paid $1,000, and residents on top of that have had to pay individually. So we shared the cost. It's been a reasonable cost, but this will eliminate that at least during the pilot. So I don't really see any negatives for the borough.
You know, I do have another question. Since we do have some multifamily apartment units, not all of which are particularly curbside accessible, would there be any possibility of them using our recycling center?
No. That's a hard no. Yeah,
I think that can be worked out,
yeah.
though. That can be worked out.
Yeah, I think they are enthusiastic about picking stuff up. Their business model is to make money in the future, which is pretty tough nut. So I think they are dependent on getting material, and I agree with you, and I think they'll try and work that out. I don't know if you remember, we had a recycling drop-off behind the co-op, and it was disastrous. So that's why I would say no. People from everywhere will know that there's a drop-off. So.
Oh, but it would still have to be scheduled.
Yeah, I just don't, I think we need to let them handle that with the apartment buildings. Well, I'm happy to work with them, but I don't think our yard is the place for that.
And he did talk about that, using apartments and
Yeah,
being able to.
yeah.
The app, the app is pretty descriptive, and there's a contact person within there. Maybe on the phone it might be more complex, but it seemed, he walked us through it, they do that regularly. It shouldn't be an impediment for people who live in apartments. We don't know until we try, but
Right.
it seemed like that's something they've already managed well.
Yeah. Just have visions of bags of clothes and TV monitors
Sitting out
inside
front.
the Chester room.
Yeah, no, we would not, that's a good thing to monitor.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? If not, thank you, Lauren. Great. Next on the agenda is the Finance Committee report.
Yes, we did meet this month, and we do have, the committee has something to discuss and potentially get approval on. We've all come to agreement within the Finance Committee, but just to take a step back, we have two particular funds. One is the general fund, which is we tend to keep between, if possible, 5 to 10% of our revenues in the general fund. We have a general fund balance. It's what I read off every month. And that's been pretty consistently between 5 and 10% the last 5 years. The last couple of years we've been very fortunate to have excess revenues, and we created, if you remember, an operating reserve fund. So that's separate from the general fund. And it has approximately $500,000 in it. And one of the charges was we didn't know exactly what to do with it. And the Finance Committee has been debating how if there's a better way to just, as opposed to just leave it as it is, which is we do collect interest on it. And right now it's basically the same interest as we're paying the debt. So in other words, the interest we collect is matching the interest payments that we owe for the $1.5 million plus that we have borrowed. So we thought, again, unanimously, there would be a better use of the funds for a couple of reasons. To one, take that $500,000 and put $100,000 in the capital reserve fund, which has been, I wouldn't say depleted, but we've used it pretty aggressively in the last year. The capital reserve fund, if you don't remember, every year we budgeted $50,000 as a contribution. But last year, we used about $150,000 for a variety of projects, which Jane could get into if you want to know details. But one of the thought that we had was to take of that $500,000 in the operating reserve fund, put $100,000 into the capital reserve fund. There was some discussion, maybe we should put it in the sewer reserve fund because that seems like that could have potentially issues, because you just never know, and our sewer system is old. But you lose flexibility when you put it in that fund, because then it can only be used for the sewer. When it's in the when it's in the capital reserve fund, it can be used for the sewer or any other capital need we might have. So that was the idea, that's why we arrived at that number of $100,000. The other $400,000 we thought should be used to pay down debt, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, even though right now we're collecting interest that is equal roughly to what our payment debt is, that is not guaranteed to be the case. It could be that, and we've seen this before, that say, the interest rate we receive could go to zero, and we still will have paid 2%, so we could lose potentially on that. So again, it's not a big amount of money, but it's no guarantee that it'll be a wash continually each year. And then secondly, we thought paying down the debt would also benefit the borough residents over a long period of time in a fixed amount. So it's roughly going to provide about $50,000 in budget relief per year. I mean, it's a very rough idea, but it's one of the few things that we as borough council can control. So it would give us that kind of visibility as we think about budgets going forward. And then finally, it would also give us, we thought, good budget discipline, because if we have $500,000 sitting there, it might be tempting for us as a council to raid that fund and use it for something to fix up holes. Whereas now, if we take this action, if there is something that happens, we will be confronted, as we should, whether we should raise taxes, borrow more money, whatever the reason might be. But it would make it a tougher decision. I think that we all thought the finance committee would give us more discipline. So those are sort of the reasons why we wanted to do this. And so I don't think we need a resolution or anything like that, but I think it's important that we all agree on that. I'm not sure if we should vote on it or what the exact thing would be, or should we vote next week after we think about it, or I'm not sure what that procedural issue is here.
There's some paperwork from the Finance Authority that probably has to be signed by the president and will therefore be, there'll be an action item of some kind.
So can we do that for next week? Would that be the
No, I know
typical
you can
discuss
do it.
now
Yeah.
and vote?
Is there any time sensitivity to the
No.
notice? Is this something we should get done as soon as we possibly can, or?
No, but I mean, the only, as we discussed in our meeting, I think once we get the approval, we're going to do it as quickly as we can in terms of, instead of waiting around or trying to, there's no reason to delay, but there is no rush in terms of whether we do it tomorrow or next week.
Well, then maybe that paperwork is the opportunity then for council to take a vote. But in the meantime,
As long as nobody's raising an objection to going in that path right now, we'll just use that as the ratifying agenda item.
Okay.
But there might be some discussion. I mean, I've used a lot of figures and jumped around a little bit.
I was trying to follow all the numbers as you were going through. The 500,000 that's in the operating reserve.
Yes.
Could you just, where does that come from? Will that be replenished at any point? So if we use it to pay off debt, does it build back up?
I mean, it potentially could. It's not something. We literally have not had this before. This was a new fund, just because we've had excess revenues in the last couple of years that have caused. If we kept it in the general fund balance instead of between 5 and 10%, we would have had 15 to 20% in that fund. So it's just way too much. So that's not a case. I know Jane would have more history on that, but as far as I've been here, as long as I've been here, we never had an operating reserve fund. We've never had. It's a high-class problem. We've just never had it. So the fact that it's gone away, we never had it in the past. So it could theoretically come back again. We wouldn't get rid of the fund entirely. We would just have a zero balance. If we had the same problem again, we could utilize it. But I think when we had this extra money, we didn't know exactly what to do with it, and that was why the committee took it up, and we've been, talking about it for several meetings now.
Right. And in opposition to your restraint theory, we could say use this to do renovations to the hall, or maybe go geothermal, or do something towards climate, getting 100% renewable with our energy use.
You are 100% renewable. I got people
On electricity.
Right.
That's just a piece of it. We probably use more.
No. We can talk.
Yeah.
We're not.
Right, but I'm just saying, spending it on something like that, a project to take our energy use to truly 200% we could use it for something like that?
We could, and we also, even if we didn't do that, we could borrow X amount of money to do exactly that. Right, because that would be a capital need. I mean,
Right.
it's not preventing us from doing that. It's just I think what would be nice about that situation, let's just say that that's a capital project that's very long-term in nature, so call it 30 years or something, what you're kind of describing, I think. That would be an ideal situation to use debt. I mean, I don't know exactly what you have in mind in terms of how that would transpire, but that way you're matching up the usage. Whereas this, I mean, you could, I mean, there's no reason not to, but I think typically in a municipality it would be done via debt or by raising taxes to match it.
So there's really no advantage in spending it versus paying off debt with it?
No, we can always, I mean, our financial situation is good and our tax base is strong. If we need to borrow money, we have a good reason to do so. We're not going to have a problem being able to borrow money. But I think in this particular case, we don't have that project unless there's one that we don't know about that's been presented. So that was sort of the timing.
I'd like to just add that historically, the borough had its, I used to call it a reserve, but you call it something other than that. It's the extra money in our account.
General fund, yeah. General fund balance.
And then there was a point in time where a significant amount of permit fee money came in. And that's basically what we're talking about here. And that was put into this fund. And because the nature of that money came in, generally, it's not supposed to be spent on, like a one-off party or something. It's supposed to be spent on things that benefit everybody in the borough somewhat equally. So in effect, we're operating with more cash than we should have, and in a very even-handed and appropriate way to use that money, which we could have done at any point since it came in, is simply to pay down the debt, which benefits everybody. And then I'm talking about what we discussed in committee, that it's really appropriate if there are individual ideas for those to come up in the annual budget process and to be debated against each other. Not, let's just do this one thing now. It's appropriate for those to come in the general budget discussion, and there are often things weighed against each other, and to have that discipline around that. So that, my understanding, from our meetings, is that was the general thinking. This is a very basic, even-handed thing to do. It doesn't leave us with any less extra money than we would normally have. We're still on target for the 7 or 8%.
Yeah, we have the financial flexibility if there was a project that we're all in favor of.
Yes.
I mean, obviously within reason, we could borrow the money or
Yes.
raise taxes to do so.
And the borough has the ability in the annual budget process with very healthy finances to do what they need to do. And importantly, if we have a sewer problem, that's actually more appropriately handled through borrowing. That's the way traditionally you do the sewer problem. So that's just my understanding of the logic behind that, just to add.
And the only final thing is getting back to our Quaker roots of having less debt.
Yes. And because that's an operating, like a capital thing, it would have nothing to do with the SAFER grant and the jump up. We're not shorting ourselves on money for that.
No, we've factored that in. Obviously, when that comes up, that's going to be a whole nother debate, because that's going to shift, depending on what we do, right? Once the SAFER grant, I'm going off of recollection when that exactly ends, but I think it's going to go up by 62,000 next year, which we've factored into these calculations. But then at that point, that's when the grant ends. So then we have, then a bigger discussion has to come about, which is.
And there isn't enough grant savings to pay if council decided to keep full-time 4 staff members, which is what the SAFER grant has helped with. Prepayment of the grant would not be enough. Prepayment of the debt would not free up enough money for that.
anyway.
So that debate's still going to be,
Kind of gets back to the same thing. If we want to keep it, we have to either figure out ways to time.
We need to look at the whole
Yeah,
picture.
yeah, exactly. Or if we really want it and we feel strongly, we're going to have to figure out what's the revenue stream in order to support that.
so this will provide a bit of a relief valve, frankly, for operating expenses. And then, as I just said, if there are capital projects to be added, those would be done through new debt service.
And I just wanted to ask Ross or Michael, since we have quite a few members of the public here tonight, when you say the permitting fees, you just want to spend a minute explaining what that was so people don't think it's some sort of a penalty that we assess people? Do you want to talk about what they were? Because it wasn't. And I don't want people to think we had extra money up there, this is what I'm trying to get explained.
Those were permits, there was
Building
very,
permits.
very large
Building.
building
Yep.
projects in
Yes.
town that resulted in, and there were very appropriate fees.
Right.
It wasn't windfall or
Right.
anything like that.
Yes,
So, does that answer your question?
yes, it does.
All right. Any further discussion on the Finance Committee's report? I guess, as we had mentioned earlier, the next step or the vehicle by which council will have the opportunity to say yea or nay will be this paperwork that's got to be prepared.
And
Just
so
put
maybe
on the
this
agenda for next
month,
week.
you know,
All right.
whenever it gets.
Okay.
It might not be until July, but
Right.
it will be.
Right, understood.
So hopefully everyone will remember this conversation.
We've all taken good notes.
We will.
Great, thanks. General government, sir.
Wait, can I just add one more thing?
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to meet this month,
Okay.
unless somebody really has something pressing. I'm actually not going to be here on our scheduled date, so. But if somebody has something, please let me know. I'll think about that for next week. Maybe we can do it earlier if need be. I don't have anything specific.
Okay,
Sorry.
thanks, Michael. All right, Sarah, general government.
Yeah, so we met on the 20th, May 20th, and as I think it was noted that parking is on the agenda today, but when we talked about parking, it was specifically, this hadn't come up yet, about the broken parking meters. However, it's the general theme that people in this town, you know, are definitely interested and have different issues around parking. And I think we can all agree, everybody, that parking should not be a burden on residents, merchants, visitors, workers, anything like that. And so when we consider parking resolutions and things like that, we are considering what the purpose of those are. What's the purpose of meters, meter fees, all of that, enforcement, everything. And so what we addressed specifically in May was we had representatives from the merchants come to talk to us, our committee, specifically with certain requests. And a few of those requests our committee felt were reasonable, and so we put together this resolution to address that. But before I mention that, we are also working to change, this isn't in the resolution, but working to change the signage on the meters, just to make it more clear in terms of enforcement times and costs and everything like that. That's something that maybe we can consider in the issues that came up tonight. But those are being worked on because we are now we're thinking about changing the parking time, so that's why the signs haven't come out yet. So the resolution that's here, that I think you all got, is looking to change the cost of the meters. That's one thing that it's looking to do. And so it's looking to change, basically double the amount of time you can receive for each coin. So for 5 cents, 10 cents, 25 cents, you get double the amount of time. So I think there's a quarter right now for a half hour, a quarter would be for an hour. The reason why this was brought up by the merchants is they said that people were feeling like they weren't sure how much time they had left on the meter, you know, and it would make people leave certain people's stores and things like that. And so they thought if it was just, if a quarter covered a full hour, that would be easier. We talked about it, and we thought it had kind of a minimal impact on our budget. And so that seemed like a reasonable request. If that would actually impact people's ability to come here, stay here, shop here, do a few more things, then that's what we want to do. So that's one of the things the resolution would do. The other item is changing the time limit. So, you know, there's different businesses in town with different kinds of services. And one service specifically, the hair salon, you know, people can be in a hair salon for longer than 2 hours, and they can't really come out and feed the meter when they're getting their hair done. And so that was specifically an issue that someone had, and just like it was brought up tonight, using the app can be difficult for some people, and so it's not a simple fix for everyone. And so the request was made that we change some of the 2-hour meters to make them a little longer. So the resolution also looks to convert four of the 4-hour meters to 2-hour meters to 4-hour meters, and strategically placed around those businesses. Now, of course, there's no guarantee people are going to get that parking spot and everything like that. You know, there's factors variables we can't factor in all the time, but it addresses that to make it hopefully a little bit better. So that's what the resolution does, it's just those two things. It doubles the amount of time received for each coin, and it also changes four of the 2-hour meters into 4-hour meters. Any questions?
So one issue, sir, regarding the changing in duration from 2 hours to 4 hours. That also allows merchants who have parking passes to use those 4-hour spaces. So, I think that the ultimate result to the businesses that want more time is going to be minimally beneficial. I mean, I just don't think that their customers are going to have a shot at those meters if they come in to get their hair done at 11 or 12 o'clock when the 4-hour meters are available to everybody, including merchants who have merchant parking passes. I mean, unless we kind of address
Sorry, so the merchant parking passes, I thought they could park anywhere. With those
4-hour
ones.
meters.
Only 4-hour meters?
You can make 3-hour meters.
You can make them 3-hour meters, and then they couldn't park, and then they couldn't park there. That'd be an issue. But I think you are going to run into that. All the merchants would love to park in front of their stores. The reason they don't do that now is because they all have 2-hour meters, and they want to get the stickers have to go.
About 3 hours and 59 minutes.
However you want to do it. Just an issue.
No, that is something to consider. I think though that, I mean, the meters were specifically picked to be in front of the salon and everything like that, so it wouldn't be, I think the merchants know each other also, so, I'm not sure exactly how it would work, but I do know that.
I'd like to think that was the case, but I
Yeah.
think that they still love their
Yeah.
stores as close to their businesses
Right.
as they can.
I think Marty's right, because they still already, they're trying to get the very closest ones in. So the 4-hour ones are right now behind the co-op and down here, and you can see how they fill up.
Okay, so if we want to do 3-hour, I mean, I think 3-hour could be a compromise. I'm not married to being a 4-hour
Yeah.
meter, but this wasn't an issue that came up in that meeting.
Checking that.
What are the percentages now of how many meters are which?
Like the percentage breakdown.
I don't have it in front of me, I can't remember.
I don't know.
There's about 15, we have 330 meters, I think.
It's been too long.
Yeah, I know. The majority are with the 12-hour meters for trained meters. Probably 80 2-hour meters, 40 4-hour meters, very few of the half-an-hour meters. So, and, sort of the 2-hour meters were all close into town to get more rapid turnover.
Can I ask a question too? Is it complicated to instruct the app people to change the rate? Like, is that difficult?
No, the harder thing is to change the meter. You gotta change that to the meter.
And I guess another secondary consideration, I mean, right now, the 12-hour meters are cheaper than the 4-hour meters. So.
There wouldn't be any more though. 'Cause I mean,
So, yeah. So I guess, so right now, if you're going into the city for half the day, you might typically take the 12-hour meter because it's a cheaper rate.
Right.
But if they're the same rate, which is what would happen now, maybe more commute people who are going to go into the city for 4 hours, either A, put in the coins and then add on with the app, or just utilize, are we causing another problem? I guess that's is there an unintended consequence that some other commuters might go to the 4-hour meters? This thought, it just occurred to me.
Let me just make one comment. So we've been working on these parking issues for forever. And this all brings back a lot of memories. And so the good thing is that when we change the structure so that we can do this sort of thing by resolution instead of by changing the ordinance, that we can afford to be a little bit experimental.
Yeah.
And kind of see, because it isn't such a big deal. I mean, I know, Jane, there are there
Oh, it's not a big deal.
are administrative issues, but it isn't such a big deal to change something if it doesn't work out. So I guess,
Do we have to buy meters? Do we have to replace the meters or just?
No, they just have to be sent in.
Okay, all right.
Adjusted or
Yeah.
Rob may be good himself, definitely not a big deal.
so I think all of these issues, I mean, have sort of been with us forever. And I'm not sure if there's any ultimate resolution. So if the committee, I was just going to say, I'm saying all this because my conclusion was going to be, if the committee feels like this is the way to go, then, maybe we should try it. If it turns out that it doesn't work, or it has all these kind of unintended consequences, we can always change it. I mean, yeah, I think the idea of 3 hours is kind of maybe a good idea, but I'll leave that up to you guys.
No, I'm on the committee, so I totally agree with the rate structure. It occurred to me now that it's going to be costing more trouble. But you're right, I think it's just you try it if it's causing a problem.
And the idea behind all of this was the merchants came to request these things, and the meters were made like this to help them get more traffic to begin with. So now they're saying, well, that didn't help us, this could help us. And we thought about it and thought, well, maybe it could help them. And like you said, it's something worth trying and seeing what happens. And I guess that's how that's.
So all of our meters would be half the price, basically.
Except the commuter ones, the 12 hours.
The 12 hours.
Stay the same, which now they would be the same price, right? Is that?
I believe so, yes.
You still know what you get now.
Looking for the parking sticker.
I have a question, maybe it's more of a procedural question. So since this part about the merchants and town center has to do with general government, but obviously the enforcement issue that was raised tonight, that's public safety, would it make sense while we're working on a resolution to do something that clarifies, once we decide what that answer is, what one does when the meter is broken and how that works? But our committee, public safety, won't meet until June 18th. So we could either have the committee talk about how to handle that end of it, or, if I don't want to hold Sarah up getting this part done for the merchants. So I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to go and how maybe the solicitor or somebody could draft us something. And maybe it doesn't go under 44205, it goes under some other part about when we have a broken meter. What do you have to do? You have to report it?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because somebody just said, like, if you want to change the thing, you have to take the meter and send it in to have them change the money thing on it. But so obviously these heads can be taken off and sent somewhere.
Yeah.
So without doing any legal thing, could we just administratively say, if there's a broken meter, you take the head off of it and send it in to be fixed, and just de facto it's a free parking spot?
Well, we
It's all
do.
the meter head.
We fix them now, though, and my understanding is when it says fail, like I think this one did, that's a dead battery.
That's just a battery.
Inside the meter, and we do fix the meters when it's brought to our attention, or when Brian from Public Works goes around, he checks once a week. Do I have that right? To
Sometimes
see.
more, actually,
But-
yeah, so we don't, that's just,
That doesn't get
we're
sent
changing
out.
the guts so that it knows how much time you get.
Right.
But for the repairs,
It's
usually
mostly
two
batteries.
things.
Yeah.
It's either
It's
batteries
batteries.
or it's sometimes a jammed meter,
Mm-hmm.
which can happen at any time and it has to be unjammed.
Canadian quarter kind of thing.
Could be anything, but that, I think, does get fixed on a more immediate basis. So you have to bring your own batteries when you try to park your cars.
I kind of feel like it is a separate issue.
It is.
It is a separate issue, okay.
So I guess my response, I would say, either we can maybe discuss it tonight or at committee, but let's not hold up Sarah's resolution
Okay.
in the meantime. But that's just me, Wayne.
Yeah, no, Ross?
Putting it on.
Yeah. Anybody? That sounds
No, I
fine.
think it's what it goes. So you guys will talk about that in your committee.
I believe that is it, or tonight when we do our committee report, we could talk about it if we wanted. I don't know how, I'm not sure how to proceed, because I'm not sure if it's a litigation matter.
Well, Ms. Painter's particular circumstances are litigation matters. To talk about her particular appeal, you should do that in executive session.
Okay.
But But if you want to talk generally about, should we change things, that's fine.
Okay, and we'll, Sarah, sorry, go ahead.
No, this is great. It's what we should be doing.
So people want to try the 3 hour? Yes?
I think so. I mean, I think 3 hour, that's better than the 2 hour, and
Yeah.
give it a shot, and then it would prevent
The 4 hour, I was just looking at my phone, I can't find where we codified the 4 hour, but I am sure that it was, they can possibly, we didn't limit the 4 hour meters that they can park at to any particular location,
Right.
so. We had another change.
We moved the 4-hour meters away from the near town center to basically get merchants primarily to park further away, and people that will be going to be here for longer periods of time to park a little further away from our stores as possible. That's why they're kind of on the outskirts of our town center.
Yeah, I'll make that change.
Okay.
Send it around again.
So we'll get that changed, and then maybe then we'll discuss it again next week.
Yeah, you don't have to advertise it, so you can decide to pass it next week.
Yeah,
or-
we can vote on it next week if
Great.
everyone's okay.
Sounds good to me. That was pretty much the bulk of our meeting. I did want to bring up that the initiative of the One Built One Swarthmore is happening right now. If you haven't heard about it yet, you still have time to read the book because they're discussing it on Friday. There's some quick readers, right? So it's going to be, there's going to be a discussion starting on Friday at the library and going all weekend with different activities for different ages. And there's information about that posted right outside there in the library. If you're interested, the books are, I think there's still some books available at the library, and they're at discount at the campus store. It's a really great initiative, so hopefully people will come out to those events. We are going to be meeting this month on, I think, the 17th would be the third Monday, in this room, 7:30 p.m. Thanks, and that's it.
Thank you, Sarah. Betsy, planning and zoning?
All right, easy. We'll be meeting on June 13th, 7:30 in this room, discuss some issues around adopting the new state building codes and also some changes to our use and occupancy permits. I believe everyone got a copy of my new proposed ordinance, number 1087, which is basically changing the wording from pervious, impervious to hardscape, in order to not conflict with the state's regulations around, it's not sewer runoff, around
Stormwater management.
Stormwater management, thank you. I guess, so we have to do the normal process with this one?
It's not, it is an amendment to the zoning code, so.
So, yeah, it's going to be a long process.
Yeah,
With
okay.
hearing and sending
All
it
right.
out to the county and the borough planning commission.
Okay, so I guess if anyone has any questions, if not, maybe we can vote next week to move it into advertising and.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions,
Yes.
which I don't think will make any difference on that. But so just for the benefit of those who could be interested in this kind of thing, we got a couple under section 1 definitions, and recognizing this is amending an ordinance, so we don't have everything here in front of us, but we've got pervious cover as a defined term, and we have hardscape as a defined term. And this amendment actually then goes on to tell you what hardscape is. Patios, porches less than 2 feet above grade, parking areas, etc. So we know what that means. Is pervious coverage everything but that?
We're removing pervious coverage.
All right, so that's gone.
Yeah, we're
And that will-
actually replacing it.
That'll be replaced with
Hardscape.
but hardscape doesn't sound pervious to me. Pervious sounds like the opposite. No.
All right.
So maybe Jane, could you?
The way the code reads right now
Yes.
is the zoning portion of our code says that you have to be 40%, you can have a maximum of 40% impervious cover, 60% pervious cover is required. Problem is, those definitions do not jive completely with the stormwater management, which also uses the terms pervious and impervious cover. and can be somewhat discretionary by the engineer depending on how some materials are put in. Great example is gravel, another one is pavers. If pavers are installed for concrete, they are completely impervious. If they are installed over a deep bed of sand, they're quite pervious and may even be a stormwater basin. People were very confused trying to reconcile the two in two very different codes. But there was still an interest in regulating how much hardscape, things that looked like non-green cover you could have on a lot. So this kept the same percentage of those, but it called it hardscape. So you can't cover more than 40% of your lot with things that look not like grass and bushes and trees. This is exactly the same as it is now, we just call it impervious cover.
Got it. So that would include structures, obviously.
Well, structures, yes, it would.
It would.
Include structures.
So-
We're keeping the lot coverage definitions the same.
Right.
And those are much, much lower. For most of our zoning districts, it's between 12, 18, and 20%.
Right.
So that's the same. So yes, all of that gets added, and then you add in walkways, driveways, patios, swimming pools, I think the planning commission would do. Anything that is not, that is not, again, green. The stormwater management stays the same. If you're adding more than 500 square feet of impervious cover, you need to do stormwater management, and that is defined in the stormwater management regulations. When this code was done in 1974, the borough had no stormwater management regulations, nothing. It was completely unregulated. So this was actually a way to control how much buildup there was on people's lots, as well as, and control runoff, as well as the look of a lot of hardscape. You don't really need that anymore, in fact, it creates a conflict because of the stormwater management. I mean, I just had another call today who thought somebody was in compliance with their zoning because they were in compliance with the stormwater management regulations on impervious and impervious cover, but they don't meet the lot coverage or the setback requirements, so they were confused.
But to follow what David's asking, are we also removing the definition of impervious cover?
We don't have a definition, it's
We
only
don't have
impervious
it,
cover.
it's only pervious. Okay.
But in the stormwater management, it's called impervious cover, as it should be, because that's really what you're regulating, is you're not impervious cover.
All right. Yeah. And the reason that we had to stay with lot coverage and hardscape is to not also conflict with builder terms. There were some other suggestions, but then it would have created a conflict with how builders talk about these things. So, yeah, this covers all the buildings, which is the lot coverage, and then all of the other hardscape.
Many zoning codes actually use the term building coverage, where we use lot coverage, and lot coverage for what we're calling hardscape. Another option would be changing a lot more sections of the code. And I think most people who do work here are used to our lot coverage term, which is anything over 2 feet in height.
Great, thanks for that explanation, because it didn't leap out at me, but yes.
Yes, so I have some questions, because this is the first I've seen this also. So this was recommended by the planning commission.
It was actually first recommended by me, to be honest.
But then the planning commission agrees.
We did a lot of work on it.
Yes, okay. So for residential, it says the combination of lot coverage and hardscape will be 40%. So that's the maximum. So that means like your house, your porch, everything.
Your driveway,
You
sidewalk.
can't go beyond 40%. So what you were saying about, let's take pavers. So if you have the kind of pavers that have sand underneath them and they green and everything, is it possible that they would be permitted under the stormwater law?
Yes.
But not permitted under
Correct,
this?
that's right.
So this is more constrictive than...
It could be more, the planning commission discussed this at length.
Yeah.
That was the very example, should perhaps they go up to 50%, because right now, people who put in pavers and convince the engineer that they're going to drain, they're considered impervious, and now they're going to be considered hardscape.
Right.
They made the decision to leave it at 40%, the first draft actually increased it to 50%.
And in reality, they all felt that none of that is, that none of that allows drainage. That in reality, that when you put the pavers over sand, that it does not allow drainage, that it should be considered
But
hardscape.
that's really the engineer's decision. I don't,
Well, so that was
to me,
my
it was,
other-
no, to
that
me,
was my other
I actually don't agree with that. I think what they
Yeah.
said was, they thought 40% was a good number, because that's almost half your lot covered with things that are not, that are hard to look at.
Right.
And that was a reasonable, yeah, really hard to look at. That was a reasonable number.
Well-
Had nothing to do with what was required for stormwater.
So that was my other question, because once again, this is the first I've seen this, so I have no background on this. So the 40% number, my first thought was, is that something that comes out of some generalized standard that's accepted broadly, or is that a Swarthmore specific number?
It's the same number we have now. The 40% now is the number for impervious cover maximum.
I understand
So it's the
that.
same.
And that should be reflective of actual conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, when that zoning ordinance was drafted in the 70s, hopefully a land use planning consultant was used. Yeah, they look at what the existing conditions are as to what lot sizes generally are. And your ordinance is supposed to reflect an existing condition.
Well, okay, so that was my question. It's not, in other words, in dealing with the stormwater issue, which is, this is not the stormwater law, but in dealing with that, people look at that and they do calculations and they say, we need to fix the stormwater problem by having less runoff. So this is not that kind of a calculation. This is kind of what we all agree should be covered or not covered.
It's the visual context of a lot.
Visual context. So this paper, going back to the paper thing, we have some lots in the town that are smaller, some that are larger. Obviously, if you have a very small lot and let's say you have, stone in your driveway and you want to put pavers in and you want to do the kind of sand underneath, and somebody says, well, that's going to increase you to too much. So then what do? Then they
Get a variance.
have to get a variance.
And that was discussed, that would be inappropriate to go for a variance.
And,
But the condition you mentioned, where they have a driveway and they're just changing the building
Yes.
material, that's hardscape either way.
Yeah.
And they
It's
would-
still, it's all
it's
still
hardscape. So replacing
not if it's
hardscape.
gravel.
Yes, it's considered hardscape. I mean, that was the, there was a lot of,
stone?
yes, there was a lot of conversation about this in planning commission, because in reality, according to what I consider a pretty skilled group of professionals, none of that stuff drains.
But it's not about the drainage. Again, we're
Yes,
trying to
right,
separate
Right, but
drainage.
it's, so it's considered hardscape.
Hardscape
and the building
because it doesn't,
drains,
it
Okay.
doesn't look right.
Right.
So for the gravel and for the pavers, if you submit that for the stormwater management, that will go to the engineer, depending on how it's installed. This has nothing to do with percent coverage. If it's over 500 square feet of impervious cover, and the engineer may make a decision that based on how you're installing that you get a certain amount of credit, so it's not, let's say the driveway's 10 by 100.
You're talking
10,000
stormwater.
square feet, right, for stormwater. That's up to the engineer on that.
Right.
But for the hardscape, looking at how the lot is covered,
Right.
very visual, just like lot coverage, which is how much massing you
Right.
have on the lot, that gravel would be included. And I would add up all of those dimensions and see if it was 40% of the lot. Just like now I add up when a building permit comes in. David just submitted a building permit, he saw me do it. I added up the house and the addition and the garage and divided it into his lot size and told him he was not over on lot coverage. Did it for somebody else today and they were over on lot coverage. So that would be the same thing, and then that would be calculation number one. Calculation number two, which I do now for the pervious impervious, to make sure they're not over 40% of impervious. The problem is the definitions are not the same, so, and they don't particularly matter if what we're looking at is of how much of the lot is covered with hardscape, with things that are hard and not green.
So that leads to my next question, which is it prospective? Is it, in other words, if you This is just on new applications coming in, there's not going to be
Yeah,
some
with zoning,
program to go out
with
and...
zoning, everything that exists now is grandfathered.
Right.
Yes, and you're allowed to actually keep a non-conforming condition, you can't add to it. So if you were non-conforming right now on hardscape, you would be allowed to continue that, and you would in fact be allowed to replace
You can replace
one with another.
So does this then almost loop the stormwater thing? In other words, if ours is, if the appearance thing is...
Appearance is left in zoning,
Right.
stormwater management is left in stormwater
Right.
management. In our water, it's called watershed protection, whatever.
So you have to meet both requirements, right?
And you do now.
They're like separate requirements, and you have to meet both of them, even though
Purpose is different.
it's the
Well, that's my
purpose.
point.
The
That's my
purposes
point.
are different, right, right.
At least with respect to something like these pavers, you know, if you don't meet this standard, you're not gonna, it's gonna be irrelevant whether you meet the stormwater.
Right, I
You're
will
not gonna
say
get your-
that in 30 years, I've had maybe 2 applications that exceeded the impervious cover requirement. I mean, it just, even if you have a small lot, most people are not gonna cover that much of their lot. You've got, you know, most people have a front yard, they have some rear yard. I mean, there are gonna be a few places where they would have been over anyway on our current definition. I do not think you're gonna, this is not gonna be in any way punitive to people. I actually think it will make life easier for people, so they'll stop saying, wait a minute, I didn't think I had to do stormwater management because I wasn't over on my impervious cover. Because you can add 500 square feet of impervious cover or hardscape, as we're calling it now, and have to do stormwater management, but be perfectly in keeping with the zoning code.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're trying to make clear to people.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy, and Jane. But it's important because it
And it did start because of that very paver issue, right? It did start at 50%, and that's something that, I don't know, could that be changed later as they continue to talk about it, or do you think advertising it before you would that be
Well,
such?
I think that once you've sent it off to the county, we want to stick with, if you change it after you've sent it to the county planning commission, they're gonna have to send it back. And it just take, it really slows it down, so.
I mean, if you change it to 50%, their argument was that's half the lot, and maybe that's just too much hardscape on a
We
lot.
were trying to picture people paving half of their lots, and
Well,
that
I mean-
just wasn't what.
I totally get that. I don't know what the smallest lots are in the town, but if you have like a really, really small lot, I don't know what the smallest ones are. It's a different formula than for somebody who has a huge piece of property.
Right, and chances are, as I was saying, they would be in a situation where they would be looking at a variance for probably anything that they wanted to do.
The big difference that this really is going to mean for most of our residents is that right now, we don't really require permits for patios if they're block and this will mean that people will have to apply for permits for patios. So that's really the one real world application of this. The lot size thing is already in the code. So.
Any more discussion? I guess what we would do then is next week we would vote on advertising.
Well, we go to forward it to the county planning commission
At the same time.
and do it both.
All right, any further discussion then? If not, we'll move on. Betsy, do you have anything else?
No? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Barry, Public Safety?
Thank you. We did not meet last month because of the election. We will be meeting this month on June 18th, which is the third Tuesday here at 7:30 p.m. And I'm going to propose now, I think we've already decided, we will talk about this issue with the broken parking meters at that meeting. I want to encourage anybody who's interested in that issue to come to that meeting as well if you would like. You don't have to come to the meeting. But as the solicitor said, we're not going to be discussing your particular matter where you've already been ticketed. We're going to be talking about what we're doing going forward, but you're still welcome to come to the meeting if you would like.
What's the date again?
The 18th, 7:30 PM.
Are you gonna circle back to that?
Well, we can talk about it now if you want, or we can talk about it then. I was going to talk about it then, but we can talk about it now.
My one concern is that until we have a chance to talk about it in committee and bring it back in here, we kind of have this open issue of tickets being issued. And I guess I'm kind of feeling like we should be waiving those until we resolve this. Just because, as I've read the ordinances, I don't see anywhere where it's supported.
And my question is, I don't know who's got the authority. I don't know that we have the authority to waive the tickets. I think the chief of police does. I don't know.
I think you can tell the chief of police chief what to do. I think
Oh.
you can.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, I think you can have a policy, that you could articulate a policy that no enforcement action is to happen on broken meters while you work this out.
My question. Ray, how does enforcement, the police or Linda know that the meter is not expired, that it's broken and not expired? Is it clearly indicated on all broken meters that they're not just expired?
So there are different words that come up with the meters. They'll come up as fail, which, as Jane mentioned earlier, could either mean that the coin cup inside it is full and it won't register, or the battery could be dead, in which it's too low. Then sometimes they'll get a blank screen. But then what happens is every single meter that somebody parks at when it's being enforced, the officers have to check the meter itself, and then they have to go onto the app to verify that it wasn't paid through the app. And then after it is verified that it isn't paid through the app, based on the ordinance, as we have been doing it for over almost 30 years, that's when the tickets are issued.
I mean, so I'm just trying to figure out, is there additional time involved, and is it possible to really find out in the field before the ticket's issued that it is a failed meter rather than, for example, if the meter's jammed, it doesn't say jammed.
I mean, that would really require Public Works. Rob does a lot of the meter fixing. That would require Rob to come up to see what the issue is with the meter. Our officers don't open the meters. We don't have anything to do as far as the maintenance of the meters. All we do is enforce the.
And I think you can limit whatever action you want to where the meter says fail or out of order.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in principle that until language is more definitive, we should do something about being a little more discretionary in terms of issuing citations.
So let me just
Tickets.
ask, can I ask a quick question on procedure on this ticket that Ms. Payne talked about? If she doesn't pay it, you'll then issue a citation? Is that what the normal?
It would be. What would happen is there's a 10-day grace period where under the state code, the borough has the right to set those fines, and that fine could be, the parking ticket could be satisfied through the borough code, which we all know is a $5 fine. Once that 10 days goes by, it will then have to be transferred under the state code, where a traffic citation has to be filled out for that parking. But then that gets sent to the immediate district court. But then there's other state fees that, under the state code, have to be imposed.
So I just want people, if you're going to figure out what you want to happen with this particular.
When was that ticket issued?
Last Tuesday.
So it's within that 10-day grace period?
It has not, my understanding, it has not gone to a citation yet. The remedy of going to a citation would be if someone wants to contest it. That is the proper format for it to be contested, because with a disagreement between the police department and a civilian, the district justice is the issuing authority.
Well, I would suggest for council's consideration that we recommend that the Borough Police Department suspend any type of enforcement action where it's clearly evident that one of the meters is failed, right, is not operating for some reason, until such time as the Public Safety Committee can meet and determine, what a more permanent clarification perhaps of existing ordinances would be. So I would say, going forward, again, I'm not dictating this, I'm just presenting it for council's consideration. Going forward, enforcement would be suspended, and then I would also say that any ticket issued within, the 10-day grace period, which I'm going backwards from today, would also be suspended.
Do you want that to be the tickets of the people who come forward, or, because I don't know that we would be able to dictate
You wouldn't
what
know.
parking tickets are issued. because
So I think
of-
I think it's.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the one you know about. and going
Right.
forward.
And going forward, and unless there's someone else that I don't know about, that's why I kind of put it that way, because we know about one case, but I don't know if there are others or not.
I think we could also do it in terms of if someone comes forward, and said, like going forward, if someone comes forward and says, here's a picture, it said failed, or whatever, then, I'm not.
Well, there's no way to verify.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it has to be verified.
Yeah.
So, and again, this isn't a prediction
No.
of what the ultimate
Right.
resolution
Well,
is.
I like your ideas, but I'm thinking, all right, so we're gonna meet on the 18th, so we would suspend any enforcement at least until then. But even if that night we meet and the committee decides, okay, going forward, we need a new ordinance, like it would be an ordinance which needs to be advertised and all of that,
I'm still thinking through whether you need to write into the ordinance, so you can just have
a resolution.
Yeah, just a
Yeah,
resolution.
I'm thinking a resolution might be easier.
Well, when we changed the setup, when we first made the big changes to parking, right, I think the ordinance says we can change a lot of things about parking meters, like time, right,
Yeah.
and fees and all that sort of
Broad
thing.
interpretation.
By resolution,
Yeah.
maybe,
Good idea.
Right. So maybe this would come within that. I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to
Right.
look at it. But
Well-
maybe you could look at it, Bob, and see what you think.
Yeah. Sure, that sounds good. So at least through the 18th, when we meet, we would suspend enforcement of things that were brought to your attention that were because of the meter failed. Is that a good way to put it? And then once the 18th comes and the committee meets, we'll decide where to go from there, because the best we could do would be come back at a July meeting, and I think we're only having one.
One meeting in July.
We would have to come back in a July meeting and propose a resolution that would be drafted by someone to say, here's the procedure when a meter's broken. Either that is, on the borough and there's no charge, or unless you report it, we would figure out what we wanted to say. But does that make
Is
sense?
that more a general government issue?
No, because it's enforcement. General government deals with the meters when the merchants come and say, because Sarah and I talked about this today, so did Jane and I, when the merchants are coming in and saying, we need more time, sort of the things she talked about. But on this, which is purely parking enforcement of a meter all over the borough, really, if it's broken, that's public safety.
Whatever involves enforcement.
Yeah, and a little bit of public works, because it's not the police department's job to fix the meters, as you talked about before. I just, on behalf, I guess, are you asking the meter maid to look at the meter and not issue the ticket, or are you saying that when they come in, you want the chief to void the ticket?
I'm thinking that if someone comes in and says the meter was defective in some way,
I think
that-
you ought to tell the director meter meeting.
Yeah, and in some way,
That's where,
yeah.
why, that's something they're looking at the face of it. And that's your evidence of whether
And
you
do we
agree
want-
that it was, that meter was working or not.
Yeah.
Do you want them to be able to park there all day? At a
No.
fair meter?
no.
Do they have to call us? What's the deal? What do you want to do?
If it's a 2-hour meter and it's busted and that car is still there, 4 hours later, it should be ticketed. And I know it's not gonna be easy to know that because you're not.
It's going to be impossible.
Yeah.
You'd have to chalk the
You
tires.
can't do that. You can't
Oh, we're not allowed to chalk
No,
the tires.
wait, back up a second. That's illegal in different circuits. It's not illegal here yet. So-
I think we're also assuming here, though, is that we don't have broken meters that often. We're not talking about massive numbers of metering. We're talking about a rare circumstance. So yes, somebody ends up parking there all day, somebody, won the parking lottery that day. So, I guess I would also want to leave open the idea that the meter maid doesn't catch a fail. And if somebody comes in and says, look, I tried to put money in the meter, or, because just, following what went on, people do take pictures of these things. So, or if the meter's truly broken, then someone could walk out and look at it and go, oh yeah, it says fail. So I think there are ways to document this, and I guess I'd like to see it, leave leeway for that, just
So-
because.
There are the occasions, and just so I can get some clarification, there are occasions that we do get people that come in and say that they have put coins in the meter and it didn't register, but no fail comes up. You still want those enforced.
What's your current practice on that?
We enforce them.
Does anyone know if
Yeah,
that actually happens?
I'm just reading the ordinances, it says you have to put money in the meter.
Yeah.
So if you put money in and the meter doesn't register it, technically you've done your duty, like the way I was reading
I
it.
guess my dilemma is you're asking us to verify something that is completely unverifiable.
In that situation, it would be unverifiable, we would have to.
So that means anybody who comes in and claims that they put money in the meter, we wouldn't be able to write a parking ticket ever.
And that is
Because everybody.
I don't think that for your tech reason.
For a month.
I guess my problem is just so I can, we effectively would not be able to enforce any meters.
I think you ought to stick to where you do.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
because it's
I agree.
It's
I
just,
think
it's a bright line rule
yeah,
that's
we
easy to
have to
work
have that.
with.
Otherwise-
You just can never account for every contingency. This is a bright line rule in this direction.
Yes.
But I think if the direction is to the meter maid, that's important, that's why I asked. Because that's
Yes.
different than just voiding a ticket.
Yeah.
You're asking her to take
Right.
additional
Right.
steps.
Plus it's.
And report it to the borough office,
Yes.
because I still think there are instances where people get mad, and then probably end up paying it, even though it said fail, and we don't know, and it's been 3 days since something went out, and that could be 12 people who got hit if it's 2-hour meter, right? Who saw the same fail. So I'm hoping that when as this goes forward, we can find some way that they trying to get that break, they have to let us know. That may be a sign. Like, since we're putting signs on the meters anyway, maybe that will.
What if someone does take a photo of the meter saying fail? Would we accept that?
So, I mean, I guess, I think you don't really know that that's the meter.
I guess
And I know you want everybody to be honest, but
I
we
mean, you
work in
really think
different
somebody's gonna go to that
Absolutely.
length to
Yes.
save a quarter?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I know it's crazy.
Yes, I'm
I do.
sorry, but
I also know that absolutely what happened.
Yeah.
Happened, and I know it's happened before, so that's not everybody. But, and I don't think you have to deal with the outliers who are doing crazy things all the time, but I think we just need to add it to the discussion as well. Not in the next month, but at some point.
So there's
So you
also an issue where procedurally, we as council are dealing with a time issue of when the committee comes up.
That's what I'm
We
worried about.
are not going to turn
Right.
the council into traffic.
No,
Right.
please do not.
Yes.
No.
Right.
And I don't want to waste your time administratively voiding tickets where
Right.
we just start with the source when they're given, like Jane is saying, that's the rule and it's in her, not discretion, her assessment of the situation, then that is the bright line rule. And I think that's the best that we can do. And I do think giving a bit of a grace period, I mean, we're suspending enforcement until at least the 18th of June. I think that's a reasonable thing to do in response to this until we figure out what to do going forward. So I agree, I think I hate to call her a meter maid, what is her title? What is she called? Parking enforcement officer?
What did it say?
Yes, the parking enforcement.
Well, the officers also give parking tickets.
They do, they all do, but I think that that's a reasonable thing, but I think left to the devices of people, Betsy, I think it's not even about their honesty, it just makes it too complicated, I think.
So, just for a moment of clarity.
Yes.
So I wanna make
Yes.
sure
I was
that
going to
we're on the
ask
same page.
if you were clear.
I wanted to make sure, so it's going to be pushed out to meter enforcement and the officers that when they come upon any meter that says fail,
Yes,
they are not to issue the ticket.
that is correct.
But all the other circumstances, we just continue as normal.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And that is until June 18th.
Right.
And then we'll figure out on June 18th what we're doing going forward, but it won't be until July. I would imagine that we will continue the no penalty until we have the July meeting. I would figure we would have to do that, but we'll figure that out on the 18th of June.
And I think in the meantime, we will not, we'll advise Nina not to get the stickers for the meters, because maybe there'll be a little disclaimer on there, you know, if the meter is broken, whatever.
Yeah.
Decide.
Just to make sure everybody's aware, this is not unique to our municipality. This is an issue that's being confronted all over the country, in small towns, big cities, dealing with broken meters. So, I mean, this is something that we need to clarify, but it's this part of the whole parking dilemma that it's been the bane of my existence.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is a dilemma.
It's very hard, and we really do try in the Public Works Department. I mean, President Rob, I was on the phone with him 3 times today, and Rob said, you know, I can go out at 9 o'clock, I can sweep every meter, and at 10 o'clock, 5 of them can have dead batteries, and I'm not going to know until somebody tells me, or until I go back out. So we'll work on those procedures as well to deal with intent.
Okay, all right. You go with that, Ray? All right.
Before we leave this,
Yes.
just one comment. Before Isabel leaves, Isabel, I just want to thank you for kind of bringing this up. This essentially is how how government should work. Citizens come, they present their cases. Borough Council sits and takes these issues seriously, as minor as many people think parking is, and a $5 ticket doesn't mean very much. But it's really what this is all about, and I think that, you know, I appreciate the fact that you took this far, and, you know, that we'll try to work on resolving it in the future.
Thank you.
Okay.
And consider coming to public safety.
Yes, please do. And I do just want to say that. Please encourage people, if you do have an issue with anything we do, to come. Oh, I'm still talking, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Both of you. Please come to the Borough Council meetings, because we do read Nextdoor, and we are aware of it, but we don't conduct government business on Nextdoor. So to the extent you have an issue, this is the place to come. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
No, she wasn't leaving, I was leaving. I just wanted to talk to her 1 second, and then you started addressing her.
For the rest of the meeting, but you may leave
Yeah.
anytime.
Thank you.
All right. Ross, Public Works.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I
We're still in
have
public
yeah, I
safety.
have one more public safety.
Sure.
Again, I guess I'm in Virginia Beach this week in my mind.
Uh-huh.
And I just had a conversation with Elise, and since we're talking about parking and people getting upset,
Yeah.
you know, it's been discussed, and I really think we need to move forward with doing something to make that front office, the borough office safer.
We do have a plan. I was putting it on hold until budget time, but I'm happy to present it if council would like. It's I think it's about as currently drawn.
And we could take that up.
Well, I was going to say, that's a
Yeah.
public safety committee discussion, right?
Yeah.
To have that there.
Building,
Yeah.
Or
whatever, but-
I was
We
gonna,
have talked about it.
right, I was gonna
Public
put it
safety.
out there as a request from the administration at budget time to
Yeah.
sort of get away from these sort of middle of the year discussions, but I'm happy to bring it forward now. And what committee do you want it to?
Well, we have already talked about it in public safety, so I'm
Okay,
saying
right,
let's
right,
continue
okay.
having it there.
I'm just saying, let's front burner it.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's great, I'm
front
sure they'll
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yep. No problem.
So I'll put that in the minutes then, yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it, because it came up when we talked about the cameras when they were installed.
Yes.
Yep.
It did.
Thank you.
That's a very nice thing.
All right. Anything else on the public safety agenda? Mary?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That seems like a
Hey,
plan.
let me think for a second.
Ross, Public Works.
Okay, we are going to meet in June, our usual day, which is the last Thursday of the month. I think that is the 27th. And so we did meet, we went over a whole bunch of stuff. I'll try and go through it quickly. I'll skip to, I know on the agenda we talked about a piece of legislation, but I'll do something light first. So we had an inquiry made about the possibility of using goats to do weeding in Little Crumb Creek Park. Okay? And because some places do hire outfits to bring goats in and they eat weeds and poison ivy and stuff like that. So the committee communicated with Sue Kelly, and Sue Kelly is going to contact people to come back to the committee, and I think we'll just see where we go with that. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And I'm going to tick down a bunch of these. So street paving, the contract, is going to Glasgow. If anybody has any questions, you can ask about that. But that's where it's going. We think we're going to have a good program. The sewer project is moving ahead fabulously, I think was the word used to describe in the committee. We, in June, this meeting, we're going to have members of the Centennial Foundation come in to talk about the condition of the walls in Central Park and some proposals they have to alleviate that problem. That's something that's been on our agenda for about a year, so that's really positive. We had some discussion about the water and the street issues at Yale and Rutgers. Some possible bids came in. There may be some more bids, but the committee is kind of holding off on that because right now it looks like with the change we made, removing the concrete island, we may not be.
Could you just repeat that, because I didn't
Sure.
hear the end of
The
it.
change that was made to the concrete island,
Yeah.
we're not seeing some of the same problems, so we're going to keep it on our agenda going forward, but, we're still thinking about that, but we're not taking any definite action on that. We had some discussion about the capital reserves, and particularly for streets, and the manager talked about, just gave us a review of how much we've been spending. We've been on this program. You want to the game so they don't wear out faster than you're fixing them. And we've been doing that. And in the general budget meeting at the end of the year, we'll bring that up to see whether we want to tweak that a little bit more or not in terms of our pace on that. I got a communication, maybe others did too, from a group that was interested in a piece of federal legislation, which is way above our heads. But the federal legislation had to do with tractor trailers that are these really long double ones that are 91 feet long. And there's a group in the Capitol that is trying to advance legislation that would tie the hands of states and municipalities and not allow states and municipalities to keep them off of their roads. So there's a group that is active in staying on top of that is against tying the hands of local municipalities. And so I'm going to participate in a phone call on that, just to stay on top of that.
Does this involve the interstate commerce clause?
Yes, it does. And it was our Congressperson, Mary Gay Scanlon, who was interested in this and asked if we could participate, so I volunteered to do that. So then, let's see, I can't remember. I think I already told you last time how the septic train tunnel thing, I talked about that last time, so that's kind of old news. Thank you all for submitting the recreation survey to the Delaware County Planning Department. Appreciate that. We had a little discussion, and the manager can talk about this, about Act 31 grants. Maybe, do you want to talk about that today or no? But it's just something we're looking into, the possibilities and ways to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say.
Okay. So now we get down to this state legislation, House Bill 474, Stormwater Fee Act. I think I circulated something on this. So the Borough Association is supporting this bill. I haven't checked. Is it still hanging around? Is it?
Well, I think I had said into my email to you, the Boroughs Association does not think it will make it out of committee.
Okay.
I don't think it's had a hearing before committee. So the chairman is not in favor.
Okay.
Against a lot
So
of,
it's
it is a
going.
local government.
So it relates to MS4, and MS4 has to do with stormwater, and each year we end up dealing with this where the state puts requirements on municipalities to alleviate various problems, but doesn't provide any funding to the municipalities to do it. And so we end up hiring the engineer to come up with things to do, but these are basically unfunded mandates, and if the state wants us to get serious about doing them, then there needs to be a fee mechanism to be able to fund them, because they could not be funded out of our operating revenues. So this was a bill related to that. Apparently, townships of the second class in 2016 were given authority by the legislature to set up a fee funding mechanism for these things. And this new legislation would push it down to boroughs and give boroughs the ability, without having to establish a municipal authority, like the kind of thing we do for a sewer authority. So that's it. We'll keep our eye on it.
Did you want to have council approve a letter or resolution or anything, or not right now?
I don't know whether it's worth it if they're saying it's not even going to come. I mean, if there was a possibility, I probably would have our committee draft something.
We'll just keep an eye on it
and bring it before you. It is an issue. MS4 is an issue for us every year.
I'm actually going to talk about it a little bit. I promise I'll be quick, but again, the very same issue that you're talking about on the warrant report.
Well, I'll tell you what. I will undertake to draft something and circulate it before next week, and we can all just look at it. And
I think the Boroughs Association, that one contact they gave me, he probably have some kind of draft. He was excited that we were excited about it.
Yes.
I mean, we can pay for these stormwater improvements out of grants or borrowing money or regular operating funds, but I think the idea behind the legislation is that it should be fee-based, just like what we charge for using the sewer system or getting trash picked up. But apparently not everyone agrees.
Okay, so I'll circulate something before next week on that. And then we did talk a little bit about, in the committee, about the Fairview and 320 light, but I think that's more properly for public safety. I don't know if it's time to
I
talk.
think there's two lights under public safety. We've been looking, well, Fairview and 320 is going ahead. That was reported
Yeah,
months
we have
ago.
already
And
approved
we've
that.
been talking, and actually, I think, Mary, also at your meeting, now that the guy, our traffic light guy is going to come and talk about
The other light, the timing.
the timing of the light and other possible upgrades at the light at Chester and Swarthmore.
Great.
Yes.
Can I bring snacks?
Mhm.
Bring your toothbrush.
And then I think the last thing I'll mention is that the Swarthmore Senior Citizens Association, you may have read in their last issue, they were talking about the sidewalks, and so they've invited the manager to attend a meeting on Friday, the 14th, and they've invited me to go along too, so we're going to go and talk with them about that and hear what their concerns are, and we'll report back to the committee.
And they were very clear in the email that they have not moved forward at all with any ideas, and they wanted to know particular what administrative burdens might be, what the legal issues might be. So I think it will be a good conversation. And I think they was very appreciative that they wanted to hear from us before they came up with a plan that might or might not work.
Yes. That's it.
Thank you, Ross.
Sure.
What's happening on 320?
I was going to report on that.
Okay, all right.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we're getting there.
Before we get to Jane's report and Marty, any other business, any member of council wants to bring before council at this time? Hearing none. Marty?
Thank you. Right. First of all, a hearty congratulations to all of my fellow nominees on their landslide victories at the election. I mean, I think, I don't know, we seem to have squeaked through, so we'll see. We'll hope the same thing happens in November. And also for everybody that came to the Memorial Day commemoration, it really was quite a nice day. I don't know how many people were there, but the speaker this year was just, I mean, I think everybody was floored at how good he was. He's a retired career military. Everybody expected the same old, and he was very, I mean, he was really spot on in terms of our need to be vigilant in preserving what we take for granted. He really was. I think everybody was quite taken by his speech. So for those who were there, thanks. And if not, it really is an important day here in Swarthmore. Not enough people, I think, attend. We need to kind of keep trying to drum into people's minds that 4th of July is and Independence Day is a wonderful celebration, but Memorial Day is really a special commemoration. And just let you know, there's a Thursday, the Delaware County Planning Department is having their second in their placemakers seminars, helping communities look at ways to create destinations in their downtowns. So I'll be going to that. I don't know if anybody else is going to be there. So anybody that's there, we'll see you there. That's it for me, Richard.
Thank you, Marty. We have a second public comment period. I see there are a couple of members of the public still present. Anyone care to address council? I guess not, so the second public comment period is closed. Jane?
The project on 320 is the state's paving of the road. First they milled it, and they woke up warm once, and then
All night,
all
night they know it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any control over it at all. We did try and get out as much notice as we could. Unfortunately, I was away this weekend, and the chief sent me a message that said, "Oh, look at this, the paver is stuck out of business on Chester Road at Ogden."
Really?
Of course, I looked at the picture and thought, man, that paving looks great. But they had to get a crane to move it. It was broken down. Right at that crest, you know, where people already managed to smash it. But it is a great job, and it is completely funded by actually your tax dollars. The gas tax, it's the annual paving in there. They did 320, I think they started in Chester, and they're going all the way up to Route 3, I believe. So when they're done, they will, the paving should probably be finished tonight, I would guess.
They were out there tonight.
They are, awesome, yeah. Right, so, and then they will restripe it, and anywhere where we had paint, I don't know if people remember, I think I mentioned this last time, that they did agree that if we had put down that high resolution paint, they would replace that. I was actually pretty impressed that even, they went and striped the road even after they had milled it, which is great for safety, because a road without striping is very unsafe. So that does not always happen, so this company was, maybe PennDOT made them do it. That's that project, and it could have dragged on. They didn't have to be done with this contract until December. So I was super happy, and their communication, I think, has been really good. I do need to give a little MS4 report. I know, did you report, you're going to request an executive session?
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So I know that we're in a rush. So I just, MS4 update that's on there, for those who don't know, M stands for municipal, and the 4 S's stands for separate storm sewer system. And under the, it's really under the Clean Water Act, we are required to get a permit for our discharge into the streams of the Commonwealth and the United States, as if we were a factory making steel, and what we are making is stormwater that goes into the creek. So we, last year's activities, we are requested, and you're welcome to ask me any questions, to let you know, to let our governing bodies know what we've done in the past year. We had to submit a new permit last year. And this particular permit was submitted in 2018, sorry, not last year. It's a 5-year permit, and it will end in 2023. As part of that, we had to include a pollution reduction plan. This is our plan for how we're going to reduce the major sediment, the major pollutant in our creeks, which is sediment. And sediment comes from street dirt and everything else that gets into the stream. Our strategy is to reduce sediment in the borough streams by 10% by the year 2023 through implementation of stormwater best management practices. And this, remember, we got a grant to do one of them at the swim club to make some improvements to the stream. That project is done, and hopefully we will apply for a grant to get that implemented, and that will be one of our projects. Altogether, we thought the projects would be between $500,000 and $600,000. So it's a big, it's a lot of money, and the state has been a little slow in coming up with funding. But one of the ones that Ross found, that he mentioned to me, which is too late for this year, and we weren't really ready anyway, is the Act 13 impact fees. This is the fees from the Marcellus Shale. It can be used for stormwater improvements, and it does not, it can be anywhere. And we do know some people in Harrisburg, which might be helpful to get. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at in the next few years. There are 6 minimum control measures that are required to be met: public education and outreach. For those who don't know, we have a lot of clean stream cleanups, thanks to Sue Kelly and the EAC. Public involvement and participation, a lot of events for people. Illicit discharge detection and elimination. We actually monitor the streams, make sure that there's nothing going in that is causing more pollution. Construction site runoff control. When people come in with permits, there are certain work that they have to do to make sure that if they're doing a lot of grading work or other construction work, that they put those fencing up so it does not end up in the stream. People are really good about calling us too when it's not going well, and that's one call to a contractor. And if they don't put them up, they're in violation not just of our permit, but the permit they've gotten from the county conservation district. So we usually don't have any problem with compliance with that. Post-construction runoff control and pollution prevention and municipal good housekeeping. Those are things that we do in-house with our own vehicles, washing the vehicles and so on, to make sure that we're doing as little as possible to impact the creeks. Those are some of our activities. For anyone who hasn't looked, we have a great part of our website on stormwater management. You can click on it. It's got lots of places to go, learn more about it. And we are vigorous in enforcement of our own stormwater management regulations. Any of you who are doing additions of over 500 square feet have already seen what you have to do. It's in the middle of it right now.
I'm looking forward to it.
Rain gardens, rain barrels, infiltration beds, we have lots of different ways for people to comply.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
And we'll continue to screen our outfalls. So that's what we did last year, and I think our big thing right now is to continue to try and find a way to do these big projects that we need to reduce the sediment that's going into the creeks right now.
Great. Jane?
Sure. That's all I have.
That's all you have? Okay. Bob?
Just about the request of executive session to discuss potential litigation.
All right, so I'm going to ask for a motion. I'm going to try to do a combo motion here. Let's adjourn our work session and reconvene into executive session.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Done. Thank you, everybody.